Welcome to the Do Good Work podcast, and today we're going to be diagnosing and seeing if you are a Zoom zombie. So, question number one, when you are on a Zoom call, do you happen to chat with your teammates behind the scenes or turn off your camera and do something else and do productive work while being on the same call? Do you get on calls and think, why am I on this call? Can I do this call later? Or do you just like scroll Instagram while you're on a call? Do you get on so many calls during a day that you have no time to actually think and be productive and probably have 15 minutes between calls? Now, if you are not a salesperson, being on Zoom calls is like the detriment to actual productive work. But if you are in sales, obviously being on more calls and strategy calls and discovery calls is like your game. But if you're not in sales and you're a knowledge worker, well, you might be facing death by Zoom. So in this podcast, this episode, what I want to do is I want to show you how to lead and communicate effectively with your team. And this can be with a global or local team, but with your remote global team without being a Zoom zombie. Now, I've said in past podcasts and blog posts that the future of work is human. You can tell me that AI, VR, the metaverse, whatever, it's going to open up new opportunities, new frontiers for us to do our work better, but it's not going to replace the ultimate creator of a human, at least at this point in time during this recording. And obviously humans are not the ultimate creator of the universe. However, ultimate creators of when it comes to work, when it comes to productivity and creativity, the work that we do to help other humans thrive and solve problems in the marketplace. So my thesis is that humans will still drive work even in the midst of AI, VR, metaverse, whatever comes in the next 20, 30, 50 years. So I would highly suggest that the best way for you to work effectively, not only today, but moving forward as we address this remote world, is to know how to work better with your fellow humans. And that's your team, aka your team. And the best way to do this is to leverage two different modes of communication, which we will dive into in a bit. But before we dive into those modes of communication, we need to discuss the core foundation of work. And this is important because this is the center of all human work and communications. This is what all humans need. All of our teams need this. All of our leadership teams need, every single team, any leadership, C-suites, down to the ground worker, the person who's actually doing the work day in, day out. Every team needs this to perform effective work that makes a difference, and that is trust. We need trust to be able to depend on our team to get the job done, to be able for them to depend on us that we're going to follow through on our word. And if you're a leader and you're listening to this, every ounce of every letter, of every word that you say carries weight. So you need to follow through with your word. And if you're not doing that, then you're hurting your trust factor. And trust truly is one of the key cornerstones to not only do productive work. And we don't just care about productivity, we care about effective work that actually makes a difference. And not only that, trust fosters an environment where our team can feel safe. This goes back to psychological safety, to have a shared brain trust with our key team members so that we can actually, have that. It's like a sort of, not an intimacy, but a very combined way of thinking where we're able to depend on each other's thoughts and not be judged harshly so that we can actually come up with better ideas, innovate, create better strategies, or execute better plans. So no matter how you put it, without trust, no significant work can be done. Now that we got the core foundation labeled trust, now we can leverage two tools at our disposal when communicating with our teams. These two tools or modes of communication are synchronous and asynchronous communication. This is no surprise if you've been listening or reading some of the works that I've been publishing. This is no surprise to you. Now, to build and to be growing in communication effectively, we need to build trust by leveraging both of these forms of communication. And yes, you can certainly build trust with pure asynchronous communication. I'll give you a real life example. I've had some people who've reached out to me and we got on our first actual synchronous phone call, and they would tell me, hey, I feel like I already know you. because I either listen to the podcast, I read some of your stuff, I see your posts every now and then or your videos, and I feel like I already know you. And they did this over time because it's the law of repetition and familiarity. The more that they see you show up, the more they get familiar with you, the more they like you, the more they're able to build trust with you. Now, with your team, though, you can't just like put a blog post and a podcast every week and hope in 9 months they'll get to trust you. You want to accelerate this process with your team. So the best way to accelerate the trust building process with your team is a 1-2 punch combo of synchronous and asynchronous. So synchronous touch points, I recommend to be on a weekly or a bi-weekly cadence. So you can set the cadence of however you like. However, this cadence allows for communication to come through, and those touch points can include strategy thinking, teaching the team, edifying the team, or even just team bonding, just getting to know the team better and just setting short meetings to do bonding. Now, granted, don't do like a 4 or 5 hour team bonding session. That's going to be a waste of time unless you're doing this in person and hanging out. But that's a little bit difficult, especially when you have teams all over the world. If you do a retreat, great, let's do that. But that's, again, building team relationships. Now, you can set the cadence and the tone with synchronous, but your work has to be, highly recommend, has to be primarily asynchronous, because asynchronous focuses on the 3 things that matter most in any team that's going to make a difference in the world, in the marketplace, and today. Asynchronous focuses on deliverables, it focuses on outcomes, and it focuses on results. In my preference, my opinion, my real strong preference, this is not a rule, this is not something that's standardized, this is just my observation of working with teams globally across, 12, 15 different time zones. I stopped counting. Is that we need to be working about 80% of our day needs to be asynchronous. If your workday today is 80% synchronous, meaning that you're meeting all day and talking to people one-on-one, 80% synchronous, if you're not in sales, you're a zombie, literally. And if you're doing that, you're going to be left behind by the teams that move at a quicker pace. And I'll repeat that because, again, these words are very similar. Async is not meeting on face-to-face Zoom. If we need to define async, you can look up the blog post, but async essentially is when you're not communicating in live time. Either you leave a voice message, you leave a Slack message, or you're using project management tools and having the person, whoever is responsible for that action item, to pick it up whenever it's best at their work hours. And that's good. That, to me, I believe is not only the future of work today, but it will continue to evolve to a much deeper, decentralized, asynchronous remote workforce in the future. That's why right now, if you're not using asynchronous communication in your workday and you're leveraging synchronous communication to move things forward, you will be outcompeted in the marketplace. I can guarantee you that, because if I can work faster than you in one day, and you take a week to do that, your cadence to produce and ship is a week lag, like a 5x lag. And this is a 5-day work week. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at how can we be more competitive in how can our communication strategy allow us to not only build trust, build bonding, build, a safe place for our team to feel comfortable at work, safe to share their ideas, but also we can move the needle not only faster, but I care about moving the needle that makes a difference. I don't care about doing something fast if it's not done right. I care about doing something right and doing that at the most effective way possible. And we'll talk probably in a different podcast about the difference of productivity and effectiveness and why productivity sometimes is a myth. Well, to give you a real life example, so we just talked about, okay, cool, Raul, we did 80% asynchronous and 20% synchronous. Let's start doing this. What does that actually look like? Well, let me give you some my personal stance of how I actually do this. And this works from my experience. If you're a $100,000 company, $100,000 a year company, or a $15 million plus company. And this works, and I've done this in multiple teams. So the first thing is setting up weekly strategy calls. So this is where you get your team members to come together, and it's either a whole department team or it's a horizontal team, meaning team leaders from different departments, different teams come together on a weekly call to talk strategy. This allows for cross communications. This allows for collaboration so that they can see the face, hear the voice behind the photo or behind the web chat. And this allows really to focus on bigger picture things and moving the needle across the different departments. Now, when it comes to inter-team communication or small team meetings, I usually do a weekly 15-minute team stand-up. And the team stand-up is a power meeting, it's 15 minutes, and you literally focus on opportunities and issues. And you just focus on those for 15 minutes, and you meet with specific teams, and you don't go over 15 minutes, because if you do, then you either have to take this offline, and you have to be very disciplined around this activity. There's actions that we're talking about we can take to our project management tool. We don't have to discuss it on the call, because most things can be done asynchronously. But when you're focusing on meeting with the teams each week, this gives you a pulse of every single one of your teams. Let's give you an example. Let's say, for example, you lead 3 teams: a finance team. Let's say you lead a sales team, and then you lead a marketing team. Let's just say that's your structure, your org structure right now. And let's just say you have a product team, just in case. That's 4. So it's 4 different teams. So what you would do each week is you get the leader from each of those teams. That's 4 leaders. And then from there, you'd have a meeting every single week to talk about strategy. So it's a team meeting of at least 5, around 5 people, each team lead, including yourself. That's 5. And you have a weekly call. Talk about strategy, talk about growth, talk about opportunities, talk about where you can, fill the gaps, where are things happening. And this allows you to create a cadence, and it's like the wheels turning a little bit slower, but every single week, week in, week out, you actually move it faster. The 15-minute power meeting, how does that play a role? Well, let's say these 4 teams, your finance, marketing, sales, and product teams, these are 4 different teams. Well, you would meet 15 minutes with each of those teams once a week, ideally in the beginning of the week, because again, that's moving the needle for the week, and you set the goals of what you want to achieve by the end of that week. So that means that you're having 4 15-minute meetings. That is 1 hour total. If you want to break it up, it could be in 1 hour and a half, so you have some time to take a break, get a coffee break, or use the restroom. So that's 1 hour and a half, let's say, each week, plus an hour strategy call. That leaves you with 2.5 hours of one day to really move the needle for your entire organization. If your structure is 4 teams, 4 team leads, and you're doing the structure. Everything else outside of that falls into a project management tool where you drive and focus on outcomes. And that's really, it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. It's really simple. And this moves the needle and allows you to take the key action items, the key information from these conversations and put them into place. Because the worst thing that could happen is that you have a brilliant idea at a meeting and it just stays there. It doesn't do anything. And I've seen that so many times. We have brilliant ideas, and you're listening to this, you're intelligent. You have amazing ideas. I know you do. But when you bring it up, it just gets dropped because no one talks about it. No one takes action to it. They might put it on their to-do list or their inbox or their sticky note, but how do you follow through? This is where a project management tool takes that idea and follows it through, gives it an owner, gives it a due date, gives it context, you set expectations, and you meet on it and you follow up on it. That's the key component here. Now, the final analysis to wrap up this podcast and to review what you can be doing, just ask these 3 basic questions. And there are 3 different questions. I'll give you different questions per these 3. But the first is, how are you building trust with your team? That's the first question. The second question is, how do you want to meet with your team? Is this an all hands on deck meeting? Is this a 15-minute stand-up with a small team? What's the cadence? Do you want to do weekly, bi-weekly? Do you want to do daily? Be careful with that, but you can set the cadence. So that's the second question. What and how long do you want to meet for? Third question is, how are you leveraging technology to empower communication and drive action asynchronously? So those are the final analysis questions here, and this will truly help you. If you have the symptoms of a Zoom zombie, this is literally, this is not a red pill, blue pill type deal, but this is literally the treatment that will help you get out of becoming a Zoom zombie and allow you to lead and communicate effectively with your team. It's Raul Hernandez. Do good work.